afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Sells, CEO and founder of the PIP Group. Today we're going to try something a little new. We're going to talk about Illinois tax liens in reverse. So I'm going to explain the entire process of investing in Illinois tax liens, but I'm going to do it backwards. Why am I going to do it backwards? Because we have a lot of really good investors who invest with us, and they love all the great returns that Illinois tax liens can produce. But because it's such a passive investment, they get used to just these redemption checks coming in and coming in. And then we hit year 2.5 or almost year 3, and decisions have to be made. There's going to be liens that are unredeemed, and we're going to have to make decisions on what we want to do with those unredeemed tax liens. So what are we doing in reverse here? We're showing you essentially what happens if you have an unredeemed tax lien, and then as we go through the presentation, we're literally going to kind of wind things down and go back to the basics of Illinois tax lien investing and take you back to the beginning. But we're going to start with foreclosures first. So let's get started. So on behalf of the PIP Group clients, we provide investments in all kinds of different distressed real estate. And obviously with the things that are going on around the world these days, distressed real estate is a really good business to be in, and there's going to be a lot of folks out there that are going to try and capitalize on that, as they did with the last recession. And just be it known that we have been here for 20 years, so we're not out there to pitch you any new ideas or anything like that. We're in the trenches. We've been in the trenches when the times were good and when the times were bad. But yes, this is a great opportunity that is coming up on our horizon. All right, so let's take this from the top, if you will. Let's just pretend that you guys have been investing with the PIP Group for about 2.5 years now in Illinois tax liens, and we're coming to you to discuss what we're going to do with those remaining liens that have left unredeemed. First thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss reassessment. What is reassessment? Why is the drive-by inspection required? What is the purpose of a soft audit? Shouldn't these processes have been done before the liens were purchased? Don't judge a book by the cover. These are distressed properties, so they're not going to look like some of the things that you see on TV about tax lien investing or on social media and whatnot. So essentially what reassessment is us physically going out and taking pictures of all these properties, making sure that they are still what they were when we bought them 2.5 years ago. So we do the drive-by inspection to get that information. The purpose of the soft audit is part of the reassessment, if you will. So we're just double checking everything, making sure that it's still a viable investment, and if it's not, what processes are we going to put in place, and if it is, how are we going to address that as well? So all of this is done at the 2.5-year mark, because a lot of things can and do happen to the properties throughout this process, and we'll discuss this later as we get into the beginnings of this. So here we have a house as an example. When we pull up to this house, again, don't judge a book by its cover. This is solid to us. This has got good bones. So we like property. It's entry level for a first-time home buyer. It would qualify for Section 8. Those are the kind of properties that we actually really love, especially with what's going on in the country right now. Those are the ones that recover the quickest and have the smallest downturn, if at all any. So there's a picture of me in the bottom left-hand corner, and this is, it looks really bad. This is the inside of the home, but this is pretty typical to distressed real estate. You saw the stories back during the last recession of people ripping out the pipes and stealing the air conditioners. That's the nature of the business, unfortunately. So this is normal. So we like to tell our investors at this point, don't judge a book by its cover when you're trying to figure out whether you should foreclose or not foreclose. So this is the finished product after we put a new roof on it, cleaned it up inside, painted it, and got it ready for sale. We actually did end up Section 8ing this house, and it is, I believe it's still on our books. So we like to tell investors that opportunity is knocking. Answer the door. This is not doom and gloom. Illinois is what we call a state that is for redemption investors. That means that these are investors that are passively interested in putting their money in tax liens and getting it back out in redemptions. But inevitably, in any state, you're going to have to make some choices as to whether you want to foreclose or what you're going to do if you don't want to foreclose. So reassessment really helps us make those determining factors. It opens up a lot of doors for us. So it's a critical and vital piece of the investment process. We like to tell our investors to be a knowledgeable investor. When we reach this point, they have essentially just been kicked back, letting us do all the work that goes on behind the scenes, and let us make decisions on their behalf, if you will. At this stage of the investment, we really need our investors to look at their reassessments, determine if they do want to foreclose. If they want to foreclose, do they actually want to take the deed when the time comes? Do they want to pay the back taxes? Do they want to be a landlord? Do they just want to flip it? Do they want to sell it as is and make a small profit? Lots of things happen at this stage of the investment, which is why we're doing this in reverse, because a lot of folks forget all of this has to happen as part of their investment. All right, so it's important to know that as this process is initiating, if you will, that your liens can and will continue to redeem throughout the entire foreclosure process. The reassessments is going to be a cost that you bear for us to figure out all these things. A portion of that cost does go to what we call a postable fee, which we'll define for you here shortly. But it's important to know that once we engage that reassessment process and we engage that foreclosure process, the homeowner still has the right to redeem the taxes all the way up to the day that we go to court in front of a judge and say, hey, we've done everything. We've dotted all our I's. We've crossed all our T's. Give us the deed. They can pay up to that minute. And we have seen it happen tens, if not hundreds of times. Foreclosure costs vary in Illinois from lien to lien, and I'll give you an example of why. Sheriff's service fees. A sheriff's service fee is part of the foreclosure process. It's called what we call part of the prove-up process. If we go take the sheriff and we go serve the homeowner and he gets it done on day one, that's $50. That's $75. If it takes him 10 times, that's $500 or $750. If we can't get them served at all, then we have to do service by other means. Sometimes it's called service by publication, but there's certain processes that have to go into each and every lien. Sometimes it can be very easy. Sometimes it can be very hard. As a generalization of the average cost to foreclose, it could be between 3 and 7 times the original cost of the lien. How do we get to such a high number? We've got 3 years, 2 years, 3 years of back taxes that are accruing on the property, most likely. Those taxes are also accruing interest and penalties. You have the legal cost for it. You have the sheriff's fee, the postable fees that are involved in it. So there's a lot to it. So what are the differences between postable fees and non-postable fees? Postable fees are fees that are associated with the process of foreclosure. Those sheriff's fees I mentioned, publication fees, the clerk of court fees that are involved with it. Non-postable fees are your attorney's fees, essentially. Back in 2009, they passed new legislation which essentially said that non-postable fees, or professional fees as they called them, could not be posted to the redemption amount. The reason they did that is it was an abuse of the process. You would have what should have been a $1,500 legal cost for the attorney's fees to handle the foreclosure on your behalf. And instead of $1,500, they were pumping it up to $6,000. So the laws needed to change, which at the time it kind of put us in a bind because we were also in year one of the recession, and a lot of foreclosures were coming down the pipeline. So it really kind of jammed us up a little bit, but we have gotten very creative over the years on how we adjust these non-postable fees so you don't lose money if you engage in foreclosure and that property redeems during that foreclosure process. Okay, so let's go step by step through the foreclosure process. Step one, the audit that we mentioned, the owner notification, and the reassessment. So we're trying to get these things to redeem, right? So by doing the reassessments, we're actually also knocking on the doors and letting them know that this is going on, because a lot of the times it's out of sight, out of mind, if you will. We are one of the only people in Illinois that offer payment plans on their taxes, so we try to negotiate those as well. Again, we want to mitigate the number of foreclosures that you have to take into consideration, but it's still going to be inevitable as part of your investment. So then we audit all the unredeemed liens coming up for maturation, i.e. the end of the redemption period. Again, an aggressive owner notification campaign is done again. This time it's more letters and postcards and that sort of thing on the properties where we couldn't actually engage with an individual. We then go over with the assessments we've done with you guys and order the title reports. So that all happens within a bubble of about 2.5 months. Once we get through that, we then move on to okay, it's time to make some decisions. We're here. We've gotten the reassessments done. We need to engage in some foreclosures. We need to file petitions for tax deeds. As an investor, you're going to make selections through our investor platform. So everything we provide to you, it's just like having a bank account. It's all in your investor platform. So you go through, you make decisions, and that automatically dumps the data back to us, and we engage as necessary. We submit all the original certificates to the attorney filing the positions. Each tax deed is given its own case number, so it's essentially each one is its own lawsuit, if you will. The take notice is another Form 2210 is a take notice. We'll talk about take notices at the end, or i.e. or the beginning of the presentation, if you will, as the processes. But this is all happening on your behalf. But what we have to have you do is make selections based on the reassessments and the data that we provide. So you've been passive for 2.5 years, and now you've got to actually start making some tough decisions. This is essentially just what your dashboard looks like, and you can see over on the right the RCMD. Those are ones that we recommend that you foreclose on. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to, but that's our recommendation to do so. We will have already checked off ones that we call sale and error. So what's a sale and error? Sounds like we screwed up. It's not it at all. In the state of Illinois, there are provisions that can allow you to get out of a lot of your liens and get your principal back if something has changed to that property since we bought the lien 2.5 years ago. So I'll give you an example. We send a take notice to the homeowners. That take notice is very strongly worded, a bit misleading as far as I'm concerned, but it's legislative law how we have to write it. But essentially it says your property has been sold for back taxes. It's not true. A lien has been sold on your property for back taxes. So that being the case, let's say they burn the place down. And again, this has happened more than 10 times. It has happened. They rather, nobody get the property than we get the property. So now we have what was once a 3-bedroom, 2-bath occupied home. Now we have a burned out shell. That qualifies for a sale and error. So we can get your principal back for essentially the cost of $100 to do so. So we automatically kick off ones that we inspected, drove by, and say, okay, this is going to qualify certainly for sale and error. We file those with our attorney as well, and it is a judicial process. But again, like I said, the cost is about $100 for the sale and errors to be filed. All right, so here's an example of what it looks like on your dashboard, what your property looks like. So here you have the notes and some pictures for it. And as you can see by the notes, shingles on the roof are crumbling, siding is peeling off, it's moldy, roof on the left side is caved in. This is not the property we bought when we initially bought the lien, or this is not the lien we bought on the property when we initially bought it. So this automatically is going to be kicked off to a sale in error. So that gives you an example of what the dashboard looks like, the information that's going to be provided to you, and as you can see, petition was filed for the sale in error on 4 years ago. I'm using old data. I apologize. I like to reuse the slides when I can because nothing really changes in Illinois. But if we're talking about fix and flips or something like that, I try to give you up to the minute data of what we're doing today. But this is just for sample. All right, so we continue to step through the foreclosure. Now we're in it. We're foreclosing. So in the state of Illinois, as I mentioned already, there are extensive notification requirements. Includes, but it's not limited to, sheriff's service, certified mailings, newspaper and legal publication. The process can take months, but it's required. Everything has to be checked off before you can go to court. Then we have the hearings and the title position. Once the requirements are complete for the prove up, we'll ask for a motion for a tax deed. We get a case and we go in. It's about 30-90 days, typical for this type of thing. If there's taxes or additional fees that need to be paid at that time, that's the time that they would need to be paid if you want to take the deed. So back taxes, municipal liens always ride with the property, so we can often negotiate those down. But if, in a municipal lien example, if the city has been cutting the grass, that's a municipal lien. If the city boarded up the house because it was vacant, that's a municipal lien. So those will have to be cleared up. And then once that's all done, if you've won everything, then you get title to the property in the next 30 to 45 days. So all of this has taken over a year, most likely, or very close to a year, to get to this stage. Now, a lot of our investors say, hey, yeah, I got all the way through this. I was kind of hoping it was going to redeem. I don't really want to pay all those back taxes. What can we do, and how long do we have to make a decision to do it? In Illinois, once we have the order for deed, we have a year from that day to make decisions. So if you wanted to sell it off or see if we could sell it off, you have time to make those decisions at that point. All right, I mentioned the non-postable fees earlier and how they changed, that legislation changed in 2009, and how we would protect the loss of principal should it redeem once you've made that engagement. I'm not going to spell this out for you. I'd tell you to take a pause and read the data in front of you. But essentially what we've done is we calculate the amount of penalties you're earning on that lien, and that becomes your non-postable fee cost. So if your lien cost was $1,000 and it was 15%, your non-postable would be $750. That's your legal cost to foreclose on that particular lien. So that cost is going to vary across the board depending on how much your lien value is worth. So that's how we prevent loss of principal once you engage in foreclosures. All right, postable, non-postable fees. I'm a visual guy, so I like to see it, spelled out for me, rather than told to me. And again, these are old reports I'm using, but we'll look at a performance report that is very recent at the end of this presentation. So we're looking at, I want you to look at the tax sale section here. So you're looking at the amount of the lien was $884. The interest earned on it was $955, so it redeemed at 108%, and I can tell by that particular lien that there was not a foreclosure that was engaged on that particular lien. Now let's go to the next one. Again, it redeemed at 108%, but when you go over to the total fees, you'll see that $1,369.09 were added to the redemption total. I know that particular lien was foreclosed on because of the amount of fees that were involved with it. So that's your postable fee that you're getting back. You're not earning interest on it. You're not earning any penalties on it, but you are getting it back. And then you can see the next three, all redeemed, all were in, or the next two, I should say, all redeemed, all were in the foreclosure process when they redeemed. So it does happen. It's going to happen that they're going to redeem, but you're going to get that postable back. You're just not going to get that non-postable attorney fee cost back. We already talked about how much and when you'll have to pay these fees. Again, we're pretending that you've been invested with us for a while, and this is essentially the breakdown of it. You've got February for the reassessment costs, or I should say, I'm sorry, we start the reassessment processes around December. So the next thing is going to be February when we're done with the reassessments, when we have to start making decisions, and then the assumed postable fees. And then after the hearing, obviously they vary lien to lien because you've got back taxes, you've got potential municipal liens, but we always like to say, consider it to be 3 to 4 years of back taxes that are going to be on there at the least. And the recording costs vary, but they're usually around $1,000. We have hearing and recording in here. It should actually be one and the same. So it's going to be around $1,000 to record that deed and attend the hearing. All right, so the question that always comes up, when will I know if I own the property or not? We've kind of discussed this a little bit. It could be up to 18 months on the extreme side, but it's going to probably be closer to a year. We tell our investors no news is good news. If they're redeeming, that's happening. If there's not something crazy going on, that's good news. So there's not a lot of updates as this process goes on. So with the Illinois tax liens, it's at that reassessment stage, it's make a lot of decisions, cram a lot of information into your brain, and then you go back to being passive again. So that's why we're doing this in reverse, because it almost shocks investors as we get to that 2.5 year mark. Even though we explain all this going the other direction, they've been so passive for so long. They, for lack of a better term, they tend to forget. All right, next question. I don't want to foreclose on all my liens, but I would like to foreclose on a few. What happens to the rest? This could also be asked of, I don't want to foreclose on any. What happens to the rest? So available to you. They're not guaranteed options. We let you know that they're out there, but we don't recommend that you rely on them. So you can sell to a private secondary market at your cost plus 8%, but there's no guarantee it's going to sell. Most secondary markets are bulk packages purchased by hedge funds. So the private ones are small. They're very specific. So we are going to sell off a few, or a few tens, but it's not something to be completely reliant on. We mentioned the sale and errors. We're going to kick off some to sale and errors regardless. So once we're in that reassessment process, we're going to identify which of those we can already move in that direction. Now, as of January 2020, there has been some changes to legal opinions at the Illinois Supreme Court level as to what qualifies as a sale and error and what doesn't. So as we approach the next tax sale season in 2020 fall, we're going to be testing those theories a bit, if you will. And we still feel strongly that it's going to be everything's going to be available to us. It really has more to do with the assessment of the property rather than the provisions that are available to us to create a sale and error. But just want to put that out there. And last but not least, it remains to cloud the title. In Illinois, it'll cloud the title for 7 years. Most of the time, it's more beneficial for if a sale happens on that property, it's easier, more cost effective for them to just negotiate the payoff of the lien rather than to go through the court proceedings to have it removed and expunged. All right, so let's take a look at the first example, remains to cloud the title. This one was redeemed, and again, I'm using kind of old examples here, but as you can see, we didn't initiate foreclosure on the property. It was 108% return, and you know it redeemed after the deadline to foreclose was done. All right, so just to touch a little bit more on remains to cloud the title. The interest and penalties will freeze after 3 years from purchase. So you can leave it out there and hope it gets redeemed, but it's not going to accrue any more penalty or interest. So if we bought it at 36% and the redemptive value today is 108%, then it's going to be stuck at 108%. And quite honestly, once we get to this stage, we'll negotiate a lesser penalty just to get it to liquidate, because we really don't like the remains to cloud the title option, if you will. But it is your investment, so it is your option. What else do we do, though, to keep those liens redeeming? We send out over 90,000 notices to homeowners every year, and it's created an entirely new department for our company a number of years ago. So that is our payment plan department. We encourage payment options and financing, MoneyGram and Venmo, PayPal. All of those are options, so we can get them paying. And we do, again, phone contact. We do neighborhood canvassing. We have a ton of signs all over the state of Illinois with our name and number on it. If they're interested in buying one of the tax deeded properties we do have, that will kick off some redemptions as well. So there are a number of ways that we can continue to get those liens to redeem. We put a lot of effort and investment into doing that. That goes on through the life cycle of your investment as well. But we just don't like to remains to cloud the title option, because you've lost your leverage if you choose not to foreclose. Redeems in foreclosure. As you can see on this one, it actually did redeem in foreclosure, and you can see what the amount was. And again, 108%. Total fees and postable fees at the time was $768.77. Sold to secondary, which, I mean, it's a great market, as I said, but it's not something to be reliant on. We're going to do our best, but it's not something to be reliant on. I'll just keep it out, rehash that over and over again and sell it. Go through the motions and sell the property. As you can see, the tax lien price. This actually really illustrates it very well. How all of a sudden your $1,700 investment became a $17,000 investment. But keeping in mind, when I look at that net profit and that cash on cash, your total investment on this particular one was $17,200. But you didn't pay those back taxes until you were ready to take the deed. So the numbers as far as an annualized return are actually even better, because the big influx of cash didn't happen until you actually took the deed and were ready to sell the property. All right, a lot of the trigger questions we get asked: do I have to foreclose, and can I do it myself? You don't have to foreclose. Again, you can let it remain to cloud the title. That's just not what our recommendation is. And yes, you can do it yourself. However, that voids of the agreement you have with PIP. But more important than that, you're going to spend a whole lot more money trying to do a foreclosure yourself than doing it in a volume package with PIP. You're going to get charged no less than $2,500 per lien on yours. If you choose not to foreclose, what fees are you still responsible for? None. Everything stops at that point. You've just got a lien sitting there, and we're going to continue to work to try to get it to redeem, but you're not paying any more fees to PIP or anyone else. You don't want to own property in Illinois. So now what do you do with all your properties that you foreclosed on? Have to remember that whether it's a passive lien investment or it's a passive property investment, PIP handles everything on your behalf. So if we come to the point where we're getting deeds, now we're going to have the conversation of, okay, what do you want to do? If you want to cash flow it for a long-term rent, as a standard rental or even a Section 8 rental, here are the numbers, what the numbers are going to look like, but here's what you're going to have to do to make the repairs to bring it up to a livable condition. So you are owning property in Illinois, but we're still handling everything on your behalf. And then lastly, how quick are the sale and errors in the secondary market sales? Again, secondary market has no guarantees that we're actually going to be able to sell on the secondary market. But that happens pretty quickly, because as we get into the basics of Illinois tax lien investing, you'll see that there are certain windows for which we have to operate within. So if we're able to sell it, it's going to happen pretty quickly, because they need to follow the deadlines that Illinois legislation has in place. Sale and errors, there again, it's a judicial process, so that can take up to a year, sometimes even more. Just depends on when we get them on the books, but it also depends on the cash flow of the counties themselves. Illinois, it hasn't happened often, but there have been a few times where we actually had to wait. We had sale and errors proved, but we had to wait until the next tax sales were done in order for them to be able to clear the sale and error amounts back out. So that has happened a couple of times during the recession. All right, we're almost an hour in, and we haven't even talked about what a great opportunity Illinois tax liens can be. So let's kick it off now from I guess we'll call it from the bottom up. So what are tax liens? Reliable, predictable source of revenue for local government. It pays for your teachers' salaries, it pays for the schools, it pays for the roads, it pays for the public hospitals. Your property taxes, it pays for all of those things. The county sells the delinquent taxes to investors like us. Usually it's at an auction. More and more are going to an online auction setting, which really isn't an auction, in my opinion. And boom, a tax lien has been created. You now own a tax lien. Delinquent property has a certain set time, which is determined by state law. I have local law in here because in some states, certain counties are subject to different legislation than the other counties are. So I say local, even though it should be state. If they don't repay, then they forfeit their rights to own the property. But as I just showed you, there's a whole lot you have to go through in order to get to that stage. So how does the process work? Taxes become delinquent. They're advertised for sale. Just like as we did in the foreclosure process, they'll be in a publication for, I believe it's 90 days, or a 9-month legal cycle, or excuse me, a 3-month legal cycle. And then the public auction happens. Then the redemption and the maturation occurs. So we're just sitting back passively collecting and sending out checks to you guys. And then as we just went through, the foreclosure and the quiet title action on the back side of the investment, which is where things can get a little. So what's a super lien? The question that always comes up is, what about first mortgages? A super lien is actually a category of lien that, pursuant to the state statute, is given a higher priority than all other types of liens. Okay, so what does that mean in simple terms? If there's a mortgage on that property, your tax lien is superior to that mortgage. So when we get to that foreclosure process, if it doesn't get redeemed out by the mortgage company, then that essentially is wiped clear of the property as we go through that foreclosure process. Some examples of super liens are IRS liens, code enforcement liens, condo and HOA liens. Those are all super liens. So in Illinois, a tax lien is superior to the first mortgage. Okay, so out of 107 counties in Illinois, the PIP Group invests in 97 of them. Why is that important to you? It's important because that shows that we have the resources to be competitive. I showed you earlier some older redemption reports, and in those reports, you can see rates of 108%, and that would say, I heard in Illinois, the average penalty or the average bid rate in Illinois is more like 2 or 3%, and that multiplies every 6 months. That is an accurate statement for all the collar counties. So we're talking about Cook, we're talking about DuPage, we're talking about DeKalb acts like that, Kane acts like that. So we don't operate in any of those counties. So we have the resources to be out and able to get better rates of returns by being not spread thin, but being able to focus on other areas where the competition isn't quite so bad. You've already seen some of these, but we'll look at them again. These are just redemption reports that kind of outline what the process looks like, or I should say illustrate what the process looks like. The interest amount paid there. This is just your standard redemption report that we get every day in our office. We get this report, we turn around with the certificate, we send the certificate in, and then the check for these amounts on the far right are then sent back to us, and we then send them to you, deposit them in your self-direct IRA accounts, however you've set up the accounts with us. I briefly talked earlier about the two types of investors that are in this industry. That is redemption investors, and that is property investors. Illinois is a state where we consider them to be redemption investors. They're interested in that passive income of liens come in, liens redeem, I buy more liens, and we go over this over and over and over and over again. That is what Illinois essentially is. But as I showed you, it's inevitable that we're going to have to talk about properties and potential of foreclosure down the path. Property investors, they're interested more in property. So they're going to be interested in states that have a good rate of return, but a short period of time in which they can actually have the homeowner can redeem. So your odds of getting property are going to be much stronger. So they're looking at Georgia, they're looking at Texas, they're looking at South Carolina, which are 6 month and 1 year redemption states. What makes Illinois so attractive is the compounding effect of that interest rate. So if we bought it at 18, which is the highest we can buy it at, that means we're getting paid the next day 18% on what we spent. So if that tax lien was $1,000 on Tuesday and Wednesday the homeowner came in and paid it, they owe you $180 on top of that $1,000. That number, whatever we secured the lien for, essentially doubles every 6 months. So 18 becomes 36, 36 becomes 54, up until the point of where you get to as high as 108% on those liens. And you saw some redemptions that actually do get paid at that amount, and quite a few get paid at that amount actually. On the right, bottom right corner, that's just an example of what the certificates look like. This is a standard certificate in Illinois. Sometimes they look like this, sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're green, sometimes they're landscape like this, and sometimes they're portrait. So they all have the same language though. This is what your tax sale certificate of purchase looks like. Almost looks like a bond. The compounding effect, again, the slide I just showed you, how that works. I'm showing you where the interest here essentially got to that highest mark of 108%. That's not going to be your average, but it does happen every day. It happens a lot for us here. This is just a closer screen up shot, closer zoomed up shot of what that tax sale certificate looks like. If you want to pause and kind of look it over, as you can see, it's got the PIN number or the permanent index number. It's got a description of the legal description of the property, who owns it, the penalty rate we got it for, the amount we paid for the certificate, and the tax class. I can tell by the tax class that this is an improved residential property. Okay, so redemption. Let's just talk redemption real quick. Legislation requires amount of time a taxpayer has to redeem, and like I said, certain states, the counties within that state don't necessarily have to abide by certain rules. So, but the common law in Illinois, the redemption is 2 to 2.5 years, and as a taxpayer, you can extend that right to redeem to 3 years. We do that automatically, immediately upon the purchase. Why? Because Illinois is a redemption state. We want to allow as much time as possible for those liens to redeem, and an extra 6 months is a considerable amount of time to allow for more liens to redeem. As we already went over, you must petition for a deed prior to the expiration of the right to redeem. Illinois has very, very specific windows in which they allow you to redeem the taxes. So or I'm sorry, that allows you to either redeem or initiate foreclosure on those tax liens. Okay, again, because I showed you we're doing this in reverse, I've already shown you that there are great profits in Illinois, but it's a convoluted process. So let's just go through it step by step. It all starts with even the registration to be allowed to attend the sale. You have to register in writing at least 10 business days before the sale. The cost is between $250 and $500. Now that cost is recoupable if you buy something at the sale. Why is this important to you? Because at this point, some of you are going, oh, I can do this myself. Yes, you can. But what's going to happen when you show up at a tax sale is the seasoned buyers at that sale are going to know you're new, and they're going to pick on you. And chances are you're going to walk out there without buying anything. So you're going to lose that tax sale registration fee. The other issue is using that same example as if you were working with PIP. We have often, very often, walked out of those sales without buying a single thing because somebody in the room set the tempo to a 3% bid or even a 0% bid we've seen, and all of a sudden the rest of the day is essentially it's a blown sale. Everything's going to go at 0% or 3%. So we're walking out of there. We're not charging that back to you. That's the cost of us doing business. So this is what a registration form looks like. Again, this is pretty old, but we're just using it for example purposes here. And as you can see, the cost was $300 for the registration of the sale and another $100 for the list for the sale. In some counties, that could be $300 and it could be $500 for the list. So it varies sale to sale. This is a pretty substantial deposit and tax sale list cost based on the size of this county. It's a pretty small county, so this is that's a lot of money for registration. After the sale, so Illinois makes the laws pretty wonky, is what I would call them. They pick these very specific time frames that you have to do stuff. So after the sale, a tax buyer is issued the certificate, represents the lien on the property, has the 2 to 3 year redemption period, and if it's not redeemed, the tax buyer must file a petition after first fulfilling all legal requirements. So we've gone through what all those legal requirements are already. One of the legal requirements, which is done, maybe I have a slide that shows it. But one of the legal requirements is the take notice. I talked about a 2210 before. That is the secondary take notice that goes out. And I told you how misleading they are. As you can see, it says this property has been sold for delinquent taxes. That's a misleading statement because then the next big bold that you have to put it in, just like this, says you're urged to redeem immediately to prevent loss of property. Well, which is it? To somebody that got this in the mail, this is a lot to understand and read. So this is something that is required if you even want to think about foreclosing 2.5, 3 years down the road. Okay, yeah. So here's our timelines. Extension of the right to redeem. As I said, we already go ahead and automatically do that to the period of 3 years because we want to mitigate the number of properties we're taking into foreclosure. There are a number of steps, as we already discussed, that have to be done between 5 and 3 months before the redemption period expires. So a very specific window to make very big decisions. So that's something we take care of on your behalf. But we went through it at the very beginning of this presentation. We have to do this within very specific time frames. All right, so let's talk about some frequently asked questions on the front side. Lowest interest rate that we will buy a certificate. Um, and yes, it does. Well, no, it does not depend on strategy of interest versus deed. We want the highest rate possible. Uh, in Illinois, our focus is on interest. We've already talked about that. We strive for a weighted purchase rate average of 24%. Let me be very clear. Our liens are not earning our investors 24% per year. The redemption of a particular lien, we want it to be earning at least an annualized weighted purchase average of 24%. We cannot control the pace of the redemptions, so we're buying at a weighted purchase rate average of 24%. We have maintained about 28% for the past 8 years. Actually, we're probably going on more than that at this point. That said, there's going to be a mix where we're buying them at 6, we're buying them at 10. We're still going for that weighted average over 24, but you have to be unpredictable. You can't always be buying at 18 or 17 or 14 because everyone in the room is going to know what your threshold is. So you have to be unpredictable, if you will. There's obviously no guarantees. There are clients that have lost money investing in Illinois. Those that, as I stressed, just allow the liens to cloud the title. That can certainly cause losses if you do nothing. Some people consider it throwing good money after bad if liens don't redeem, which I hope I have shown is not the case. But yes, if you take it upon yourself to make decisions that are against what we have experienced, that is absolutely your right because you own 100% of the investment. But it does have the potential to cause some losses. Now, as I'm recording this, we're going through a crazy time on the world, much less our country. And there are currently 42 million people out of jobs. How is that going to impact this side of this business? Are we going to see more foreclosures? Is that going to potentially cause a misbalance between what you have available to invest and what you need in order to foreclose? Possibly could, as I make that statement now. However, we are taking a lot of bringing in a lot of new policies based on what we think is going to happen, based on our experience of doing this in the past in various different market changes. So we think we'll be able to keep it balanced. But this is very important to know that yes, investors have lost money because investors have made decisions outside the scope of our recommendations. Going forward, we may get into a situation where an investor is left unbalanced regardless of safeguards we put in place. And if that's the case, usually what happens, it'll happen with 1 or 2 investors every year as PIP steps in and essentially takes care of those non-postable costs, and to help out and help bring some balance and some stability to what's going on, so you don't lose money. We've been in this business for so long because we're not in the business of allowing clients to lose money, even if we have to on behalf of our clients. Who incurs the cost of the registration fees? As I already showed you, we do, and the purpose of that is how does that help you? If we go out of a blown sale, that's the cost of doing business. If you go do it, you just lost $500. Do we maintain statistics about redemption? Just to have a better understanding for strategy purposes, as well as to decide how much to invest. Internally, yes, we do. We don't share those numbers because they do fluctuate, and we don't want an investor to try to put a micro metrics in place that they can then say, okay, I'm going to put $1 million in, and I want to put it in X, Y, and Z counties. We don't allow that to happen. All our investments are done first come, first serve, regardless of the amount of the investment. So yes, we do have those numbers internally. We definitely think they're going to get a little crazy this year or over the next couple of years, but more on the positive side, honestly, than the negative. Do I think we're going back to having more foreclosures again? Yes, I do. But we have been in these trenches before, so we know how to manage them and profit substantially from them. All right, so very quickly, just a quick one snapshot slide of tax deeds 101. As the name suggests, tax deeds are what you get from the default judgment of unpaid property taxes. It's tax deed. In some states, it's very quick. It's very simple to get the tax deed conveyed into your name, but as I showed you in Illinois, it's a very lengthy statutory process in order to obtain the title. In some states, a tax deed could be as marketable and insurable as a standard warranty deed. Illinois, because it goes through so much of that, it essentially has gone through the quiet title action to get to that point. But some closing attorneys still require certain additional steps to be made to make it a warranty deed. In other states, a more formal process to clear the red tape is required, as I just mentioned. Title certification, required title action. Title certification is title insurance without the need for a quiet title action. This is a whole new subject that requires a whole new webinar, but essentially certification is the title company goes and looks through all the red tape, all the processes, and says, you know what, there's nothing here that's going to come back and bite anybody. We'll insure it. Go ahead and close it with clean title. And this is what a tax deed looks like. Again, this one's got some date on it, but it's very standard of what a tax deed looks like. Okay, so the next 3 slides, I'm not going to talk through them because you guys can pause and just read my answers, and I think that'll get this through under an hour, maybe. I made some adjustments to the recordings, so I'm trying to keep us under an hour here. So I'm going to just flip these and leave them on long enough that you can pause and read the questions and answers, and we'll keep going. Okay, I mentioned the platform in the beginning of the presentation and PIP's transparency. That, I think, is what has made us so successful over the years that we've been doing this. Is we don't overhype the opportunity. We try to undersell ourselves, and what those two do is it gives us an opportunity to under advertise and overachieve. So transparency is the number one most important part of that. So we've developed software back in 2015. Once I took over control of the company, we developed software that essentially allows an investor to get into their account whenever they want and see everything going on in real time. So that's a big one for us. And this is what it looks like when you get into your speedboat account. I didn't come up with the name. The software guy that developed it came up with the name. I'm not sure where it came from. It was called Harbor at one point, and then it was SDA Speedboat. But this is what you see when you log into your account. You're going to see, and this report is more relevant because we're looking at something that is very recent to today. So you see, we've got your certificate numbers, we've got your parcel numbers, we've got the property values, we've got the investment amount, the interest that it's earning annually, the lien to value ratio or the investment to value ratio, when it was redeemed, and the income earned on each of the redemptions. So you see all of this in real time. Let's talk about the property values a little bit, because as you can see, they go from as high as 155,000 to as low as 13,000. Um, so the property values are based on the county's assessed value. Now, Illinois allows the payment of taxes to be done in segments. So sometimes you'll have 4 segments, one payment per quarter or one payment every 6 months. So we may actually buy a half tax. So they've paid the first payment, they haven't paid the second. So when we come up with our assessed values, we're basing it on the half tax, not the whole property value. So hopefully that makes sense. But this is just a typical investment summary report that you would get showing, or that you would have access to, or if you just called our office and said, hey, send me my most recent investment summary, this is what we would send you. And it just shows you maturation date, your investment date, how it performed, what your redemption total was. Again, here you can see down here on under the Henry summary, you can see one redeemed at its 108% as well. So again, that happens often. People are just out of sight, out of mind, and it happens. And again, we're just looking at the same report. If you guys want to pause it, by all means, to take a closer look. And in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this is the performance analysis of the slides I just showed you. As you can see, again, we're up to speed now on relevance of what we're doing here. So the report was created on May 19th of 2020. And what this spits out is how this account has performed to date, how much he earned on interest. As you can see, there's value active on the right side. That active means that we've got to make some decisions on $11,000 as to what we're going to do in foreclosures. But again, you can just take a quick look at this. If you want to pause the screen, this is the performance report of this particular account, and typically this is what you're going to be seeing as well. All right, that's it, guys. I appreciate your time. I managed to keep it in under an hour. Knowledge is power. Everything I provide is educational. I'm not asking you to invest. I'm not asking you to pay me for a workshop. I'm providing you information on our experiences, and we have gobs and gobs and gobs of it on our website. So get over there, take a look, and if you decide you want to invest, we'd love to have you. If not, good luck in your searches and whatever you do. That's our telephone number down there below, info@pipgroup.com. We'll go to somebody in the office. It always goes to me, so I'm going to see it no matter what. We appreciate your time and hope that this wasn't too overwhelming, going from in reverse, essentially. So thank you again. Everybody have a good afternoon.